These characters that have become so maligned and marginalised, even in my lifetime where I still worked in mainstream media, people like Alex Jones or David Icke, they were like, even people that were sceptical about them or even people that ridiculed them didn't try to posit them as dangerous. Like, and the same, I'm assuming, with Robert Kennedy. They were sort of...
the David Icke one, they always made fun of him for lizard people. Because he always would say that there's shapeshifters and they're lizards, and there was no evidence. It just seemed really preposterous. And then in the beginning of the pandemic, he was trying to connect COVID with 5G. There was a lot of weird, like, he's got some squirrely ones. Believe it or not, like, it's hard to say, like, to the general public, Alex Jones is way more reliable than David Icke. But he's way more reliable than David Icke. Alex made a tremendous mistake with Sandy Hook, and he did that in a time of his life where he's experiencing a psychotic break. He was drinking a lot, and he was having a mental breakdown, and he really believed that everything was a conspiracy and that the government is essentially run by these evil demons who are trying to depopulate America and ruin people, and he thought they were trying to take away people's guns, and he was convinced that someone had convinced him. I don't know I don't know what documentaries or what videos he saw, but he was convinced that they were using crisis actors and that they were orchestrating a false flag. He was obviously very wrong.
Yes.
And has admitted that he was wrong about that, but he's been right about a lot of things, so many things. And I've talked about this many times, but he was the guy who told me about Epstein's Island more than a decade ago, and I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. I was like, what are you saying? There's an island, like it sounds like a plot in a movie. There's an island where they fly famous rich scientists and politicians, and they compromise them with underage girls and get it on film so they could use it against them. I'm like, what? That sounds like horseshit. That sounds like lizard people. It sounds like, 5G creates COVID. Same thing.
Yeah.
But turns out it was true. And it's one of many things. He was the first one to warn me about a social credit score system. He's like, they're going to try to implement a social credit score system, and your money is going to be tied. They'll have centralized digital currency, and your money will be tied to your social credit score system, and you step out of line, you won't be able to buy things. You won't be able to travel. You won't be able to do anything. They're going to try to keep you within a 15-minute radius of your home, and they're starting to do that in places.
Yeah,
all of it's real. And in China, the social credit score system is 100% real and implemented.
I wonder what our obligation is as people that participate in this conversation to ensure that there is a distinction made between the empirical facts that are discussed and then you in particular with your rather unique cultural space, the sort of joy of speculation. Because when you think about some of the stuff that Alex Jones has said and putting aside Sandy Hook and that acknowledged difficulty and transgression, like that, some of it's as rhetoric is amazing. Like that, they yes, there are sort of centralised systems of corruption that bypass democracy, and ultimately there is an agenda that can bypass administrative change. Policies that come out under the Republicans are pursued by the Democrats, and then and the military-industrial complex are able, through lobbying and through their overt and covert connections to government, able to dictate foreign policy. At least influence foreign policy. All of these things you can sort of demonstrate financially, and then but when you start to describe it in terms of demons and reptiles, the kind of language that like even 500 years ago was the ordinary way that he's a preacher, isn't he, Alex Jones? He's somewhere between a shaman and a preacher. He operates in that space, and in a way you need people on the cultural periphery to be able to say, watch out, watch the direction we're going in, because the thing is that the way that we're behaving at the moment, it is all underwritten by rationalism. This is the follow the science. This is the rational thing. Putin but it's just as inaccurate. It's not true either. Now, of course, like when you start talking about UFOs until very recently, or lizard people or shapeshifters, you're entering into a territory that makes it easy for you to be ridiculed. Makes it easy for you to be taken down. Now, so the times that they are accurate accurate or correct. You know, like even because if you think of the way that you were framed around the pandemic period, it's like, oh, it has far-right people on, conspiracy theorists. And of course, that they've obviously got an agenda, and it's their agenda that is driving the discourse, not the facts of the matter. And I suppose in a way, we should be grateful that they are unwilling to have these open conversations. They're not willing to get people on with various views, opposing views, to listen to people that they disagree with, to openly criticise the establishment. Because what I've been able to learn in the last couple of years is if you start focusing on the relationships between big pharma and the media, or big pharma and the government, just by focusing on that, you can really create clear narratives of corruption, hypocrisy, dishonesty. Those things are there. But me, because my background is not a journalist, it's not a conventional education, I'm sort of open to the more extraordinary, exciting, visceral ideas, which once in a while prove to be true, like the example of Epstein Island. But then you become kind of porous, and you're like, oh yeah, no, tell me all of this stuff.
Right, and then it's hard to sort out the wheat from the chaff.
A little bit, isn't it? And also your credibility suffers, and it's like, you've obviously managed to sort of follow, pursue this path, saying, like, I'm a comedian, I've not got an obligation, I'm not a journalist, I've got these people, I'm open to everybody. Yeah. But it seems like as the cultural role changes, as the power and magnetism, because of the needs, because of the necessity, because people just aren't, like you say, the loss of trust in institutions, the loss of trust in authority, being open and willing to have those conversations grants you all power. And then the commercial power comes and the financial power comes. Yeah. And suddenly you've got to navigate it. And I think it all came together in that, it seemed, at least from the perspective of an observer, in the ivermectin moment, that the culture should be able to tolerate a conversation. The culture, that shouldn't be verboten.